If the Mongol invaders don't believe in ghosts, they soon will. Here's your look at the new Spinmaster toys, the PlayStation Shapes collection, Ghost of Tsushima Jin Sakai. Embrace the legendary samurai with the official Jin Sakai 6-inch figure from the Shapes collection. This premium figure, designed by Meng Wang and Daniel Salas of Headhopper Studios, with paint by Dongjin Chao, captures Jin Sakai in his detailed armor with over 136 unique finishes, featuring 32 points of articulation. Recreate iconic poses reflecting his masterful swordsmanship and stealth tactics. Accessories include his katana, tanto, Mampo mask, and additional sword, equipping Sakai for any challenge in his quest to free Tsushima. Showcase this officially licensed product from PlayStation on your shelf with your collection today. When hope at times seems all but lost, sometimes it's hard to stick to a warrior code. Just before, of course, we get a closer look at the PlayStation, the Shapes collection goes to Tsushima Jin Sakai. I'd like to thank the folks over at Spinmaster that kindly provided this sample. The Samurai of Sakai stands at 5.5 inches in height, or the Ghost of Vengeance is going to be about 14 centimeters tall. Now, if I was to bring in the other characters we've already had a look at, some could easily say that Sakai is clearly the shortest. First of all, here's what the figure looks like with the God of War Kratos. Here's also what he looks like with Atreus. He's actually pretty close in size to Atreus. And here's also what the figure looks like with the recently looked at Horizon Forbidden West, if I can just actually stand and not knock over anybody else. Here's what the figure also looks like with Varl. Not only would I say Jin Sakai is my favorite so far from the Shapes collection, but he happens to be also the only character so far that hasn't come included with swappable hands. Look at that. He does, though, manage to come included with a sheath and a sword. He does also come included with his Mampo mask. The Mampo mask is one thing that samurais do wear. You can see it does have the facial features still shown down below, but this would be something that they would use as a mouth guard. When you're looking at this, though, and you're putting this on the figure's face, you would think that these loops would be the thing that would wrap around Sakai's ears, but they don't really. If, in fact, when you're putting it on his face, it's more just a case of friction forcing them. I mean, you could try to put them around his ears if you wanted to, but I don't think they necessarily need them. I mean, if anything, if you just put them on, just put the mask on the way that it is, just kind of get it wedged at the bottom of his face, that seems to be more than enough. But I guess just to ensure that the mask isn't going to come off, there is those little loops, and you can just tuck them around Jin's ears. Just like that. I would say, like, the mask does add a little bit of extra allure to the character. The thing, unfortunately, about that, though, with the Mampo mask on top of his face like that, it loses all the fine features that they sculpted on his face in the first place. Though, to show you what this looks like before I take the mask back off. Very cool, though. There doesn't seem to be a place, though, storage-wise, that you can store the mask when it's not displayed on Sakai. So once you remove it, you may just want to have to put it in a bag with all the extra accessories that we haven't. Well, I'm not going to be planning to display along with the figures. I sort of got myself a little Ziploc bag. All those extra hands, by the way, even though Sakai doesn't have any, all go basically into that little bag. And I've just kind of written on that, the Shapes collection, so I know where everything is. One thing that also can be displayed on the character, unlike his mask, is his sheath and sword. The sword obviously does fit inside the sheath, just in case of sliding this in, just like that. It's kind of tight in quarters, though, so you want to make sure. There we go. Fits all the way in there. It's got some really nice detailing, though. Look at the silver that they've added to the bottom of the sheath. And, of course, the actual handle here, or... pull that off. There we go. The hilt, as you can see, has some nice white added in there as well. Just below the guard, there's some additional gold. And, of course, the blade, a little bit on a softer side, is nicely done here, all in silver. Now, when I was taking everything out of the packaging and then trying to figure out where everything was, first of all, I noticed that with Jin, his back cape came off very easily. In fact, it's actually one of the easiest things to fall off the figure, and we'll talk a little bit more of that. But actually, though, looking at where the sheath was supposed to go, I didn't recognize or didn't spot right away that there was a hole on the side of his belt. This was actually covered over in paint, or probably with just residual plastic from the mold. So right away, I didn't even notice where this hole was supposed to be. Sure enough, though, I looked over to the side and I saw what only could be like a little indentation of a hole, and I basically just then took the sheath and I just doweled it in there. Eventually, though, freeing away whatever plastic was left behind, I made myself then the hole, and then you can take yourself the sheath, and that just plugs in place. The sheath, I noticed, though, you do have to apply a fair bit of pressure to it, but it does attach, though, onto the side of his belt. Sometimes, in fact, it was doing it earlier. I don't know why right now. Obviously, it's all because, of course, the camera's filming. Just plug that into the side of his belt. It is a little disappointing, though, because it's the only sheath that actually has removable sword. all the things that you're looking at right now. This sword is non-removable. And the one thing I really would have hoped, the back sword is not removable either. But anyways, you can take yourself the sword, and that just, and we'll make sure we got it facing the right way. Sheaths inside. There we go. So he's got the storage space there. Again, the only thing that's really disappointing, though, with Jin is the fact that all these other swords are only just more teases than anything else. It looks decorative, and that's exactly all it's really going to be. You can't remove this sword, and you can't remove this sword that's on the back of his body. That's permanently there as well. Something that isn't, though, permanent is the cape. Now, the cape is a fairly soft plastic. Right underneath his collar, he's got like basically a little handkerchief here. If you move that out of the way, there's a hole right there, and then this is plugging in place. It came off the first time when I took this out of the packaging, and every time that I tend to move this character around, this seems to be always something that falls off. At least though it's easy to put back in place, but you may find yourself, if you're looking to get this figure for yourself, this might be something that you're always having to take the time to put back on the figure's body, because it does fall off very, very easily. If though looking at the closer look at his face, just move his handkerchief piece out of the way there. Head sculpt wise, it is probably easily my favorite so far we got from the Shapes collection. Obviously, I think they've spent a lot of time crafting a very meticulously detailed face of the samurai. Well painted, too. You got the additional gray down below for his stubble. I think the eyes have nicely been painted there as well. And you got the little gold of the bandana that he has on top of his head. He also has his hair. Now, the hair is all tucked away back, but he's also got these little strands of what's left behind of his bandana. And those basically just drape on the back of his body. Again, like this little piece here is separate from the rest of his body. You might find that's also something that as you move in the figure around, this is going to move around on you. Really a lot of good details going on. I don't feel like you get as many chances to see a lot of pops of color on Sakai here as maybe what we would have got before with even like Varl. Varl had a lot of really bright colors. I mean, Sakai obviously keeps the colors quite dark. The samurai armor mostly is all done here in black plastic. And then they've just given it only just a little bit of gold. He's got some on his arms. He's got some obviously down below here on the skirting. And then he's got the belt coloring there added in the blue with some additional browns and greens. It's a really nice looking costume overall. I'm a little, again, disappointed that this doesn't stay on better, but I mean, that's an easy fix. In fact, even if you want to, just take it off completely. Probably one of the reasons why they made this as removable as it was, is just so that if you wanted to have Sakai displayed without it, it's a simple fix of just popping that off and leaving it off altogether if you want to. Again, the only other thing I would say is that I really wish that the swords were removable. I know that would have probably increased the cost of producing this figure because, again, like they already give you really one sheath with a removable sword here. But man, the fact that he has those two already there, I just keep feeling like I want to go there and start unsheathing swords, and I just can't because everything is all just more molded decorative pieces than anything else. Now for the figure's articulation, we're going to go back to Sakai's head here. Like with, if you already watched my reviews already of the Shapes collection, you sort of already know the territory that we're going to be covering. But Sakai's head's going to be on an independent ball joint. It's going to rotate back and forth. Yes, the little handkerchief piece is going to move around a lot on you. It does move down, moves up, and of course you can also rock it back and forth as well. Underneath all this, there is also as well additional ball joint. So not only can he move his head, but he can also move his neck the exact same directions. His arms come out, they hinge out. They were really tight, I noticed on this figure when I first took them out of the packaging. But they come out at about 90 degrees, maybe a little less than that. You can take as well Jin and you can rotate his arms all the way around. He has a swivel bicep, but the swivel is actually closer to his shoulder. He has a single hinge, though, in his elbow. And then you can also rotate his forearm and rotate his hand. So that's a fair bit right there already. The upper torso is going to be on a ball joint. It isn't as movable, perhaps. It doesn't have, maybe, I don't know, the freedom I would say as like Varl. Varl had a lot more articulation, or at least a little bit more at his disposal, I would say, than Jin here. You can move it up and down, but you can kind of feel like it seems like it gets a little more hung up. Obviously, now you're also having to contend with the fact that you got yourself a sheath sword on the side of his body. You want to make sure that you don't clip that. You clip that, obviously, that's going to pop off his belt again. The legs do split out. Again, you got the skirting on the front and on the back there, softer plastic. Doesn't seem to limit at all Sakai's leg movement. I mean, you can easily give this guy the splits. You can take his legs and you can move them forward. You can move them back. And if we lift up the skirting here, you can actually see there's a swivel cut right here. The figure does only seem to have a single hinge in his knee. Now, it could also be that he's got a double hinge, but it's kind of really hard to see. So what they've essentially done is they've taken the lower half of his leg and they've basically encased the top of it with like the additional part to his suits. So when you are moving his leg, you can kind of see that perhaps there's a double hinge, but it's really only just like if you get a double hinge, there we go. If you get the double hinge, you're going to now have this big gap space there on the fronts of his legs. I mean, it's a nice way that they've hidden everything, but when it comes to moving his legs out like this, it sort of now leaves a little gap in there, because unfortunately, that's really no other way that they could have done this when it comes to constructing a figure. Again, when he's got the ankle pivot, he has that back and forth. You can also rock the ankle back and forth this way. And also Jin Sakai does also have pegals on the bottoms of his feet. By far, this is my favorite figure we've gotten from the Shapes collection. I honestly still feel like, when it comes to Spinmaster knocking these out of the park, they really have been doing a great job on the Shapes collection lineup. Jin Sakai does have a lot more going for him. Funny though enough, he doesn't have swappable hands, but I guess the whole thing in mind is really, why would you need to have swappable hands when it comes to a samurai like this? He really should always have his hands gripped and ready to go. Of course, bringing in the other figures we've already had a look at. There's Kratos. Maybe not as much necessarily in order, because we did also look at Atreus, but there's also what he looks like with Horizon's Forbidden West Varl. And of course, here's also what he looks like with Atreus. Normally, if I had started this line, I think I did start this line, in fact, with Kratos, I would have right out the gate said that God of War is my favorite game of all time, and then therefore Kratos would have been then my favorite character from the Shapes collection. And yet, sure enough, it ends up being a character from Ghost of Tsushima, Jin Sakai here. Just like the look of him, I really think it's a neat touch as well that they also included the mask there as well. Like, whether you want to display the character with the Mambo mask or not, just the fact that they include something like this. Does he really need hands? I don't think he necessarily needs hands. I mean, he has hands all ready for holding his sword. The only thing, as mentioned already, that's a little disappointing about Jin here is not the sculpting. No, not the paint, not at all. But more just the fact that he does have these two extra swords that you can't really do anything with them. What I like to do with Jin Sakai is actually swing the cape out like this so it looks like it's blowing in the wind. It's a pretty easy thing to pull off. Because it's pegged on the back of the figure's body the way that it is, it actually just rests on the sheath, as you can probably see right here. Even though it's disappointing that the sword doesn't unsheath, the sheath at least serves a purpose by keeping the cape in place. You can also see as well, I don't have the figure displayed currently with the Mambo mask. It's unfortunately one of the casualties of having such a stellar sculpt like this, is I really don't want to have to mask it by displaying it with the Mambo mask. I wish, if anything, maybe Spinmaster could have put a peg or something on his belt, similar to what they did on the other side to store the sheath, so that there was at least a place to store the Mambo mask if you didn't want to have it on Jin's face. The figure does have posability where he needs to have it. Truth be told, maybe if he had had double hinges in his elbows, would have made things a little bit easier, considering this guy's a samurai and all. But even with only just single hinges at his disposal, it's more than enough for him to hold the sword with both his hands. From head to toe, though, Jin Sakai is my favorite from the Shapes collection. I really like the way this guy came together. What do you guys think of the figures that we've looked at so far from the Shapes collection? Which one would you say is your favorite? Perhaps as well you agree with me, it's Jin Sakai? Let me know what you think of it down below in the comments section. Once again, a big thank you to the folks over at Spinmaster that did provide this sample of the PlayStation Shapes collection, Ghost of Tsushima, Jin Sakai. If you guys did enjoy this video, do it a solid, throw it a like. You guys want to stick around for more so? I hope so. Hit that subscribe, turn on that bell, and of course come back. As always, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.